Even though tariffs have been at the heart of the power debate, there are still some major unresolved issues facing the sector. Without agreement on the way forward, Ghana is likely to find its development efforts undermined by a non-performing energy sector. What will it take to build consensus and resolve some long outstanding issues once and for all?
Issues of the power sector don't need to please the ear, because they are real issues. If we joke with them, we joke with our economy.
Strong words from energy specialist Mohamed Amin Adam, who says the power sector is facing serious challenges.
The first one is underinvestment. We are not investing enough in increasing generation capacity, but also in expanding the distribution network, despite the fact that the demand for electricity is increasing by 10% annually. The second challenge is tariffs. Tariffs are not adequate. Indeed, we are giving tariffs far, far lower than the true cost of producing power. And this will not bring in investors. But the third issue, which I think is a major issue, is supply of fuel, which we are not able to secure. Light crude oil is expensive, natural gas is not enough. These three issues are issues we must be addressing. We don't have reserve margin. So what we have is just enough to meet our demand now.
So
but in case, yes, in case any of the plants go for maintenance, we are in trouble. We are back to dumso. People must pay for the power they consume. And I think that unless we are realistic about tariffs, we'll collapse our utilities. Crude oil prices will continue to fluctuate. In most cases, upward fluctuation. And therefore, you and I are going to be asked anytime crude oil prices increase to pay higher tariffs. When will that end?
It arises out of our history. We had Akosombo Dam. We had so much power available relative to demand. And remember, Akosombo and Pon are the cheapest generation sources of power in the country. So we've been brought up on cheap power. And so if you go
Dr. Kwabena Donko, Chairman of Parliament's Select Committee on Mines and Energy.
What we must do is, first of all, recognize that the days of cheap power are over. We've exhausted our major hydro resources.
As a result, power plants are using a 50-50 mix of hydro and thermal to generate power, the thermal components being largely either crude oil or natural gas.
You don't want to use light crude oil. You don't want to use diesel. You want to use natural gas. But you cannot assure the security of supply of natural gas.
Why not?
Nigeria is supposed to supply Ghana a minimum quantity of 120 million standard cubic feet a day.
Via the West Africa gas pipeline?
What they do is an average of 60 million standard cubic feet.
Half.
Ghana's own gas from the Jubilee oil field will be on stream by the end of this year. But that doesn't solve the problem, says Mohamed Amin Adam.
Our own Jubilee gas does not promise to be sufficient for our needs, because Jubilee gas is bringing on stream 100 million standard cubic feet. It will peak at 120 million standard cubic feet. And our demand, according to VRA, is 260 million standard cubic feet.
Wow, so between Nigeria and Ghana, we still only have half.
Yes. And the Energy Commission actually estimates that by 2015, we should be going through 380.
It all boils down to lack of investment, lack of planning, and unrealistic tariffs.
People should pay a lot more for power. People should pay.
Dr. Charles Rekobrobi.
If you say power is expensive, compared to the alternative if you didn't have it, what the villagers have to cope with, kettle lamps, kerosene, bad illumination, high cost. But the point is that if I'm willing to pay more and should pay more, then I expect that I'll get good quality power. So I think this is where the debate has to be.
It's the perennial argument. Give me value for money, and then I will pay for it. Fair enough, but not possible, says Dr. Donko.
If you're being paid 4 cents per kilowatt hour, and it costs you about 9 cents to generate, especially with the thermal complementation, You are not going to say he should get more efficient before you give him the resources to generate more. That organization is going to grind to a halt.
And you think that that is the situation that our utilities are...
Particularly with VRA. VRA used to have one of the best balance sheets in our country. Today, I don't think you can buy Kose on the back of VRA's balance sheet.
That's how serious it is?
That is how serious it is.
But the debate is now out of our hands. The utilities have made their submissions, and the decision now rests with the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission, PURC. Executive Secretary Samuel Sarpong.
Our functions include developing guidelines for rate setting and then approving tariff rates.
They also monitor quality of service and have the unenviable task of representing the best interests of both consumers and power producers.
We see ourselves as enforcement, enforcing and monitoring quality of service, performance standards, and ensuring they are achieving it. And in doing that, we balance both interests. So it's a balancing act. So we are not on one or other side.
Water River Authority has made a case, and I understand that as part of your constitutional mandate, you are to review it. Are you satisfied that they've made a case or not?
When you look at VRA, if you have looked at VRA's proposals, they're only talking about fuel, but they are inefficient operations which you need to address. Right. That's why I said there are other parameters you need to take into account. In terms of staff costs, in terms of operating and maintenance, in terms of plant availability, all these are parameters you need to take account of. And we put all together and then arrive at total revenue requirement. So the issue is not only looking at fuel only.
But the business must break even. As a minimum, it must break even. They are suggesting that they can't even break even.
That's what they are telling you.
So you don't share the view that VRA has financial difficulties at the moment? You don't share that view?
We don't share that view.
Neither does Dr. Reko Broby.
People cry wolf all the time. I mean, if you remember, there was a suggestion that government owed VRA. Well, the reality is that government has paid off virtually all the debt and there's nothing there.
So how serious is the situation?
It's not serious. You see, there are issues of principles here. And we must be very, very careful about how we look at these things. VRA tries to operate like a private sector company. So he says, I want a rate of return which enables me to plow back my profit into new development.
That's good, isn't it?
No, but the reality is that, David, all new developments, essentially, VRA didn't pay for BUI, government did.
VRA has asked for an increase of 128%. And that's too much, he says.
Do the percentages matter? Is it not really a question of what you need? I mean, if what you need is 200%, you need 200%.
The percentages provides the discipline for you not to overspend. That's what it is. Because you see, in the power sector, you are dealing with monopolies. There's no real competition. And so you need to bring the discipline, you know, the same way that the people who go to China to bring the cloth and the things work on very, very small margins because there's real competition. And they understand. In a monopoly situation, you have to bring the discipline by saying that this is what you have to work within.
Muhammad Amin Adam doesn't buy into this argument.
We see crude oil prices changing. They have been increasing, you know, for the past 2 years, even though we haven't given VRA new tariffs. The second one is exchange rate. I know that from 2011 up to 2012, the depreciation in the city was about 30%. We haven't given tariffs to VRA for the past 2 years. Then the generation mix, from 20% thermal to 40% thermal, as it is today. You don't give them tariffs. Then you are collapsing VRA. And this is why I think that we should be realistic about this.
ECG, on the other hand, has a lot to answer for. Its system losses amount to 21%, an unacceptably high figure. But again, one needs to put it in perspective, he says.
One of the reasons they lose revenues is because government does not release money for subsidizing lifeline consumers. Lifeline consumers are supposed to be vulnerable people, poor people that the government wants to support, so they also can have access to electricity. But when ECG has delivered power to lifeline consumers and the government does not release money, ECG suffers revenue losses.
So, but my brother, but how substantial I mean, how many lifeline consumers are there? I mean, what percentage of consumers constitute lifeline consumers?
Lifeline consumers constitute about 15 to 18%. in my view, it is significant because we're talking about money. And if you have to lose 100 million Ghana cedis because government has not released money for the subsidy of lifeline consumers, that is so much for a struggling company like ECG.
Considering the fact that ECG's losses stood at a massive 28% just 3 years ago, it has made progress. A fact acknowledged by the PURC. But there's still room for improvement, says Samuel Sarpong.
In terms of making sure that field staff are responsive, customers are responsive to customer complaints and addressing them, minimizing outages. These are areas we need to focus on because continuity of supply rely on minimizing outages. Assuming there's no load shedding, then you can come to outages. What is their responsiveness? In terms of that, in terms of the timing, in terms of the frequency of those outages. So those are what we set performance benchmarks to make sure they achieve it.
But more importantly, the remuneration of top management should be linked to these benchmarks, either from the State Enterprises Commission or from the board of ECG.
But that should apply to VRA as well.
As well.
You're saying that there should be a relationship between how much it costs to run the operation and what they're delivering.
Precisely. Achievements should be rewarded. Non-achievement should be sanctioned.
But that, you see, sounds great. It doesn't happen.
Yeah, it has to. You see, we have to. I am so passionate about this. We cannot do things the same way over and over and expect to get different results.
We are.
But that is wrong.
How do you change it, sir?
Yes.
That's my question.
Public Utilities Regulatory Commission will have to be harder, set tougher benchmarks.
I mean, is it not
the
hard
board,
enough, the PURC?
No, the boards of the various utilities will have to set higher standards. State Enterprises Commission will have to be up to its work. But more importantly, the body politic must demand from the management of these utilities improved deliverables, benchmarked, calculable.
And if they don't,
you fire them.
the problem lies with utilities management, says Dr. Charles Rekobrobi.
Because, for example, you know that every time a new government comes in, we don't say David has done well, let's retain him as chief executive. Oh, get rid of him. Yeah, let's find one of our people who...
And that is wrong.
Absolutely wrong. There's no continuity, and people, when they are in the position, you know, they are operating on the principle the government says, jump. You say, how high, sir?
Yeah.
Because that is where their bread is buttered. All of them, they are emasculated by the wage structure. They live in a government bungalow, they use government phones, they drive government cars. So, Massa, you idea is a problem.
But for Dr. Donko, the debate around tariffs is obscuring the more important bigger picture.
As usual, we've been intellectually lazy, and so we are scratching the surface.
Explain.
For example, if we take power tariffs, it's not just about whether the tariff should go up or not, or whether ECG, VRA, Gridco, whether they are being efficient or not. The issues should be driven by what is our national strategic position.
So it's policy. In your view, it's policy.
Precisely. What we want to do with power? Power has alternate uses. What is our priority? Is our priority the supply of reliable power to industry, to commerce, or for consumption?
Power users are categorized as industrial, commercial, and consumer, you and me, and are charged different tariffs. Here in Ghana, ordinary consumers pay the least, while industry pays the most. Elsewhere in the world, the opposite is true.
Because power is more useful as a tool of production than as an item of consumption. In our country, the reverse is true. We stand logic on its head because over the years, we have not been bold as a people to confront the reality of prioritizing power. If you supply power for consumption, essentially, it's for convenience. If you supply power to industry, you are creating more wealth. If there is a subsidy, for example, the lifeline is on consumer consumption. More importantly, if we have to ration power, which of the two segments should be prioritized? I believe industrial users should have the priority.
Why do you think that's not the case, that you make it sound so straightforward?
It's not the case because we have pandered over the years to popular sentiments.
Government survival itself depends on how the people view it. In our system, where democracy is not so entrenched, people still buy votes, people still vote because you've done this or that for me. They're not looking at the macro picture.
That's what forces government.
That forces government.
According to its constitution, the PURC is independent and decides on tariff increases without interference from government. But is this really the case?
From the time I've been here 4 years, there have been no government interference. We do consultations with all stakeholders, and we arrive at our decision. We do what is right.
Independence, again, is an overused term. How independent? There are grades of independence.
In the run-up to an election year, every government in power will say, oh, we love the people so much, we will take all their things, don't put the tariff up. So you get 1 year of zilch happening. And it happens with MPPs, it happens with NDC, they are all the same. It happens with fuel, it happens with everything. The PURC will announce its bill. Okay, it's a nice trick. Yeah, but the government says, me, I love Ghanaians, they are suffering. Bring me the thing, I'll pay for it. So they say, good.
And then they don't pay for it.
Thank you very much. So that's the trick. That's what leads to government owing ECG and VRA and all those people, all those tons of money. And so you get that situation where confusion becomes bazaar. We need to find a way to shield. And this must be cast in legislation, proper legislation that will shield the utilities from direct political interference.
Transparency is the key.
You mean that you don't know how they set the tariff? Can you explain that lack of transparency on the part of PURC?
Yeah, I mean, if the PURC, receives data from the companies in terms of their capital investment, in terms of their operational cost, the PURC must be able to put it out.
You mean in the public domain?
Yeah,
it doesn't do that?
Yeah, they don't do that. What they do is to announce the tariffs. But what brought about the tariffs, the inputs, are not known to the public.
An informed people helps with policy management. But when people sit in ignorance, then ignorance begins to dictate the pace of policy.
I am advocating that for the first time, there's a transparent publication of the quality of service standards that the utilities are being asked to meet.
What about the transparent publication of the elements that the PURC took into consideration in determining the tariff?
Master David, should I tell you a joke?
Tell me.
The government of Ghana says it has approved a right to information bill and is accepting it from everybody.
That says it all, right?
Absolutely.